Thanks. I said good morning. It's good to see everybody. We're thankful that you're here for our Bible class. Does anybody remember the jingle? I doubt it's the same today, so you young person will have to, young people, sorry. Didn't mean to discriminate. Huh? Yeah, right. Double the pleasure, double the fun. Remember that? It's a statement of the great mint and double mint gum. One of the best commercial songs of all time. Easily so. So I doubt it's the same as what it used to be, when I was growing up. And anyway, I really like that a lot. Why, I'm crazy, I know that, but why am I bringing up things like double mint gum and a couple weeks ago, Double Trouble, the game, and what's been going on in our Bible study? I am weird, but I also have a scriptural reason for this. There we go. And also, I appreciate that, Justin. Obviously, I'm mainly doing it because of the names. There are duplicates of names and different persons, though, that we're describing. Different families, strangely enough, but kind of one family by this point also. But we also see a lot of events that are being duplicated, mistakes that are being duplicated, and people reaping the same thing and people sowing the same thing. And so there's much duplication that is taking place, but especially in people. If you want to, please go ahead and turn to 2 Kings 8. That's where we're going to find ourselves. 2 Kings, the 8th chapter. Now, I would encourage you maybe to mark, if you have a ribbon or if you electronically want to drop something here, that'd be good. We're going to have a couple of different places where we'll be today. 2 Kings 8, and then the parallel of that, 2 Chronicles 22. And then that'll be the last time we do this for a while. I know we've had quite a bit of this. But 2 Kings 8, 2 Chronicles 22, if you want to go ahead and jot down or mark those two spots. Okay, so we're going to read in 2 Chronicles 28, 2 Kings chapter 8 is where we begin in just a moment. But before we do that, I want us to look at another spot, okay? And I know that's quite a bit at once. I'm tossing at you. But go to 1 Kings 22. That's the last chapter of 1 Kings. And I just want to remind, since it's been a couple of weeks, and I don't think it hurts, because to me, probably not to you, but to me this gets really confusing when you're jumping these names and jumping kingdoms and at times jumping time periods. Also, 1 Kings 22. Is everybody there or close to it? So 1 Kings 22, and I ask you to look down in verse 51 near the end. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel in Samaria in the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And he reigned 2 years over Israel. I know we're done with Jehoshaphat's reign, and this is a little bit of a review, but Jehoshaphat was the king of the south, king of Judah. And at the same time, Jehoshaphat was ruler. You have this guy named Ahaziah who assumes the throne in Israel. He becomes king over the northern sector. Okay, now you might not even have to change the page as I. If that's the case, or even if it's not, look at 2 Kings chapter 1. It's the very next chapter, even though it's a different book. 2 Kings 1, verse 17. So this is the same Ahaziah, of whom we read in the previous chapter, Ahaziah, king of Israel. Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord that Elijah had spoken. Jehoram became king in his place. Okay, so this is another son of Ahab. Jehoram becomes king, or descendant anyway, over Israel, right? But listen to this. In the 2nd year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And this is because Ahaziah had no son. Normally in these dynasties, you're going to have the son of the king who takes over. That's why Ahaziah does just that. But you don't have a son of Ahaziah who takes over because he has no son when he dies. Terrible reign, terrible person, just like dad and just like granddad. He reigns only 2 years over Israel. So the second son of Ahab, Jehoram, then assumes the throne. And why does this get confusing? Because Jehoshaphat has already passed away by this point, and his son takes over in Judah, named Jehoram. Yeah. So you have two Jehorams, and also another name for that, shortened form, is Joram. You'll see at times. two Jehorams, or Joram, reigning at the same time. Okay, now things are about to get even slightly more complexing today. From this spot, I actually ask you, to go back to where we will be, 2 Kings chapter 8. 2 Kings 8, and let's read there verse 25. In the 12th year, that's actually going to end up being the final year. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab. Okay, so we know this guy. Joram takes over in Israel after Ahab's first son, Ahaziah. He only reigns for 2 years. Well, his second son, Jehoram, or Joram, reigns for 12 years in Israel. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Wait a minute. Ahaziah is already dead. Not that one, but the one of the other family. And I'm not going to keep repeating this, but I do want to state just one more time. We're thinking, well, why all of this confusion? Why are these people doing it? Why are things such a mess for us in Bible study? There is kind of a reason, a method to the madness. Look at 1 Kings 22 one more time before we get to our text, and we can move forward with that, having laid the groundwork. 1 Kings chapter 22 and the first 4 verses. For 3 years, Syria and Israel continued without war, but in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said to his servants, "Do you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us? And we keep quiet and do not take it out of the hand of the king of Syria." And he said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead?" And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses." And man, he wasn't kidding when he said, "My people are as your people." It's not just that we're going to become one family through this political marriage, but it's also that we're going to start acting just alike, and we're even going to start naming generations after one another. And I think that's why there's the confusion whenever we go back and study it, because these two families become one in every way, including the names that they're giving to their kids. So hopefully that's a good foundation. I know there's a little bit of reminder in that, but I think it can help. At least it does for me anyway. So let's go back to our actual text now, 2 Kings 8. And remember, we're going to be in 2 places today, 2 Kings 8, and the other one's 2 Chronicles 22, the parallel. But we start in the first of these as they're arranged, 2 Kings. 2 Kings 8, verse 25. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, this is the second Ahaziah, and the one of Judah of the south, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Okay, there's one other thing I need to tell you now that we've established that. Go to our parallel. If you have them bookmarked, here's where it's going to start to come in handy. But 2 Chronicles 22. 2 Chronicles 22, and I want to show you something. We're not going to cover the details of this. We'll get to it in a little bit. But the names here are important to understand about whom we're talking whenever we're reading these things. 2 Chronicles chapter 22. We're going to read verses 6 and 7. 2 Chronicles 22, 6 and 7. And he returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds that he had received at Ramah. And about whom we're talking is the guy who's reigning in the north at this point, who is Jehoram, king of Israel. Okay? So Jehoram, king of Israel, returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds that he had received at Ramah, another name of Ramoth Gilead, when he had fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, so this is a son of Jehoram, and I know we don't have it listed underneath Jehoshaphat, but you have Jehoram who reigns after him, and then it's mentioned Ahaziah, his son, so it's going to be the grandson of Jehoshaphat. Ahaziah, by the way, do you have another one in your translation, another name there? Hang on to that, okay? I know this is all kinds of crazy, but just bear with me here. So Azariah is more accurate right there. Some translators have Ahaziah that they've placed into the text, and they're not wrong. It's just that's not the name that's used right here. Azariah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Jehoram, the son of Ahab in Jezreel, because he was wounded. But it was ordained by God that the downfall of the guy of whom we've been speaking, but here it's Ahaziah. So you have these two names that are used interchangeably. Azariah, Ahaziah, same person. Should come about through his going to visit Joram. And then we'll talk more about the details of that when we get to that point. Okay, so now turn back to chapter 21. We're almost done with this. One more. Chapter 21, and there we'll read verses 16 and 17. And the Lord stirred up against Jehoram the anger of the Philistines and of the Arabians who are near the Ethiopians. And this is about the Jehoram in the south. And they came up against Judah, see the south, and invaded it and carried away all the possessions they found that belonged to the king's house, and also his sons and his wives, so that no son was left to him except Jehoahaz, his youngest son. So while the son of Jehoshaphat on the southern kingdom, as he's ruling, he's not doing a good job. He's following the influence of the marriage alliance and the people in the north. And so God sees to it that the punishment comes on him and his people, one of which is not a single son of his is left to survive, except a young man by the name of Jehoahaz. And then you get into chapter 22, and you have the son of Jehoram in the south reigning over Israel, and he's called Azariah and Ahaziah. So guess what that means about the name Jehoahaz? It's the same thing, because there's only one son. It's the same name, the same person as Azariah and Ahaziah. Now, that kind of can make things confusing as well. But every person, I'm pretty sure, every person in this room has at least how many names? We usually go by one, maybe sometimes our last name, people will call us. But we usually just go by a couple of those, but we technically have 3 names that anyone could call us. In Bible times, people ordinarily always have 2 names, and there are occasions where they have 3 names. Jesus. What else do you have? Christ. What else do you have? Okay, what else do you have? All right, with him, he has 1 million, right? And a lot of those are actually more titles or labels, in fairness. Okay, Paul. All right, those are the 2 that we have. Peter. What else? It's the one we don't hear as much. That's the Aramaic one. So Simon's the Hebrew, and Peter's the Greek, and then Cephas is the Aramaic. It happens in the Bible. Those are actually names. Those aren't titles. Those are actually, and he'll go by all 3 or a combination, right, Mary? Sometimes Simon, Peter, and yeah. Well, that happens in the Bible, and we use 3 names also. So it's really not that complicated, but it just can make things a little confusing. The point of all that is this: Jehoahaz, Azariah, Ahaziah, same person. We're talking about the same individual there. Okay. Now that I do not know. Yeah, Jehoahaz, Azariah, Ahaziah, you get here right now. Yes, Mother. All right, so 2 Kings 8, verse 25. In the 12th year, we're ready to make a little progress here now. Thank you for, I know that's a lot, but I think it helps to try to establish some of that up front. In the 12th year of Joram, or Jehoram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, or Joram, that's the one in the south, king of Judah, began to reign. Just a few things I want to state to you here. I'll point out a few of these names as we go through some meanings behind them. Ahaziah means Yahweh holds or possesses. I do think a lot of times these are prophetic in nature. Is this intended to be? I don't know. But if you look at it as prophetic, it's certainly and unfortunately not about Ahaziah himself. Yahweh is not going to hold and possess him. However, it may be in prophecy, if you want to look at it in that regard, for the kingdom itself. Yahweh holds and he possesses the kingdom of the south. Yahweh holds and he possesses his people. Yahweh holds and possesses who comes into the kingship and who leaves the kingship. And so if you look at it prophetically, there may be something to it there. If you're following the timeline, we are in 841 BC. 841 BC. Jehoram, king of Israel, his reign is going to end in this year, but so also will Ahaziah's. Now the sad reality is Ahaziah's reign begins in this year, and that tells you what kind of a king he is over God's people in the south. It's only going to last for 1 year. Verse 26, Ahaziah was 22 years old. I don't know if you've done some reading ahead with the parallel to this. If so, did anyone find a contradiction in your reading? Or what sounds like it anyway. Well, in 2 Chronicles, we're going to find that he was 42 years old when he began to reign. If you're wondering, what does that mean? Why is there the variation there in these two texts? We'll talk more about that when we get to the 2 Chronicles passage. But for now, Ahaziah was 22 years old, pretty young guy, when he became king. And he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And the writer feels it necessary to bring in the name of his mama. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. Isn't that kind of a strange introduction for a person? When you're visiting with someone and you want to know about, descendancy, you usually don't ask, okay, who are your grandparents? Where would you begin? Who are your parents? Oh, okay. I find this fascinating. I think there might be some strategy to this. God doesn't have it recorded when introducing this young lady who her parents were, who her dad was, who her mom was. Why do you think he might not do that? Let me pause right here. Right. Yeah, so you'll find that a lot in the listings of genealogies. But there's no mention just right away, though, of the generation just immediately above. I'll tell you what the name Athaliah means. Afflicted of the Lord, or afflicted of Yahweh. When you look at the end of it, Athaliah or Yah. That's Yahweh or Yah, the shortened form of. And you might think, well, that's kind of neat and interesting, because Mama and Daddy are Ahab and, not sure what Mama called Jezebel, but I'm pretty sure I have some ideas of what the citizens of Israel, what they call Jezebel. So Ahab and Jezebel are Mama and Daddy, and they're not devoted followers of Yahweh. Ahab, has this weird kind of hang on to the Lord maybe every now and then type relationship with him, or really it's no relationship at all. And we know who Jezebel is. She's just a pagan through and through for Baal, as her name would suggest. Jezebel or Jezbeel, I'm married to, I'm attached to Baal, always. That's her alliance. But I do want to mention this, that he gives a name of Yahweh in the name of his child. And you might think, well, that's really thoughtful of him, but hang on just a second. The name he gives doesn't sound very positive at all. Afflicted of the Lord, or afflicted of Yahweh. What he might be doing in this name that he gives his child is actually a label of derision toward the God of Israel. He might be saying, the God of Israel is a problem to me. The God of Israel caused all these issues in my life, and so I'm going to name my child this so nobody ever forgets it. If that's the case, and that's what he means by it, how fitting that in the name of his child, he gives something that every time someone speaks it, it's a thought of derision toward God. And then whenever God mentions the name and inspiration of this child, he doesn't bother to mention the name of the one who gave this name. I don't know. Maybe there's something to it. Yes, sir, John. And Ahaziah? Yeah, it would be Ahaziah, very likely, with his having assumed the throne first. But apparently he was so young when he died and only reigned for 2 years that he didn't have a kid. And then it would seem, I don't know that we're ever just directly told that, John, but it would seem that he's number one, Ahaziah, Jehoram number two. Good question. Okay, so the granddaughter, of Omri. Doesn't bother to mention the name of the guy who gave a name to his child that insulted the Lord. Verse 27. Now he is going to bring up his name, but not in the introduction of the insulting name. Verse 27. And he walked in the way of the house of Ahab. Okay, so what kind of a reign did Ahab possess? Yeah. I think it may be prophetic. What's his name mean? It's been a while. Ahab means, this is a unique one, father's brother. Okay? So Ahab's father was, just reminded, Omri. Ahab's dad was Omri, and Ahab's name means father, which would be Omri to him. Omri's brother. Obviously not literally Omri's brother, but just like dad is the idea behind that. He's just like his dad. What kind of a guy was Omri? Not very good, Justin. You go back and you read in 1 Kings chapter 16. Omri was the worst king that Israel had ever had, only to be surpassed in evil by father's brother, also known as Ahab, his son. So this guy's living just like these, but what's different is this. He's of the house of Judah. They're both of the house of Israel. Judah was flying high before Jehoshaphat made the fateful decision to make a marriage alliance with a rotten family that's ruling in Israel. And you have Judah has gone through, her own rocky patches, but man, has just really ascended under the leadership of Jehoshaphat. He makes this decision. Even his reign from this point, and then from there, Judah goes skydive, nosedive, straight down. Verse 28. Shouldn't have done this. Now, he went with Jehoram. Okay, so this is Ahaziah in the south, and we don't have his name on the screen as far as the lines go. I know we do have bottom right. So this isn't the Ahaziah over here. But Ahaziah, the descendant of Jehoshaphat, went with Jehoram, and his name is on the screen right here as a descendant of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Syria, at Ramoth Gilead. So let's pause right here for just a moment. Israel and Judah going together to fight against the Syrians. I'm going to pull up our map, and I know I don't have Syria on it, but it's going to be up here to the north and a little bit to the east. This is the area where the Syrians, if we were to continue, are found. And you have Judah to the south, Israel to the north, combining together, and they're going to come over to this town just to the left of my laser beam. That's Ramoth Gilead, also called Ramah in some of these sections of Scripture. And they leave either from Jezreel or Samaria in the north, and from the south there would be the venture from Jerusalem. You're looking either direction about 70 miles to the east and a little bit to the north to go to Ramoth Gilead on the battlefield. Does this sound familiar to you at all? Judah and Israel gathering together to go fight against Syria at Ramoth Gilead? Anybody tried this before? How did it work, Roy, the last time they did this? Not extremely well, did it? Go back to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 20. This is after this marriage alliance that takes place between Jehoshaphat and the former Ahaziah. I'll put that back up on the screen if it might help any. So Jehoshaphat and the former Ahaziah, with Ahab, and their families are joined together, and it's asked, hey, I need some help. Ramoth Gilead, it belongs to us. Will you go up with me? Jehoshaphat has a mighty military and battle against these people, and he says, oh man, not only are our horses the same and our armies united, he said, my family just like your family. My people is as your people. And so they go out together in chapter 20 of 2nd Chronicles. Let's read verses verses 35 through 37. After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, joined with Ahaziah, Ahab's son, king of Israel, who acted wickedly. He joined him in building ships to go to Tarshish, and they built ships in Ezion-Geber. Then Eleazar, the son of Dodavahu, love that one, of Mareshah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, because you have joined with Ahaziah, the Lord will destroy what you have made. And the ships were wrecked, and they were not able to go to Tarshish. And this is after the fact in the battle. Look now back at chapter 18. Chapter 18 of 2nd Chronicles. Verses 31 through 34, when they get together to Judah and Israel to go out on the battlefield at Ramoth-Gilead against Syria, and it's, remember, Ben-Hadad, who's the king of Syria at that point. Verse 31 of 2nd Chronicles 19, as soon as the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, it's the king of Israel, mistaken identity. But it was not the king of Israel. So they turned to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped him. God drew them away from him. For as soon as the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. But a certain man drew his bow at random, struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. Therefore he said to the driver of his chariot, turn around, carry me out of this battle, for I'm wounded, turns out mortally. And the battle continued that day, and the king of Israel was propped up in his chariot, facing the Syrians until evening, and sadly at sunset he died. They've tried this before. The forces of Judah and of Israel combining, traveling over to Ramoth-Gilead to try to take this city back from the people of Syria. Doesn't work out, Roy, very well for them. And then as we read a little bit ahead of time in chapter 20, these alliances just continue with his family. Doesn't learn from his lesson. And Jehoshaphat tries to join up in some efforts with Ahab's son then, Ahaziah. And now here we are, 2 Kings 8, verse 25. He, that's Ahaziah in Judah, this is a descendant of Jehoshaphat, joining up with those in the north, Joram, the son of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Syria, at Ramoth-Gilead. And this might sound familiar also. And the Syrians wounded Joram, who's the king in the north, so the king of Israel is wounded in battle, just like Ahab. It's double mint gum. It's the game, double trouble. You're seeing the same names, the same events, and the same outcomes, time and again. Will God's people ever learn this lesson? If you're trying to live for Him, stop joining forces with those who have no interest in serving the Lord. Verse 29 of our text, 2 Kings 8. Then King Joram went back to Jezreel. Sound familiar? The same place that Ahab goes, right? Is taken out, his dead body in the case of Ahab. Went back to Jezreel, 70 miles off to the southwest on our map, to recover from the wounds which the Syrians had afflicted on him at Ramah. See, that's an interchangeable name with Ramoth-Gilead. When he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see his family by marriage, Joram, the son of Ahab in Jezreel, because he was sick. Right? And in Kings, we kind of leave off right there. Now, here's what I ask you to do. Let's go to our other passage now, and we'll spend the rest of our time there. 2 Chronicles chapter 22, the parallel of this. And there will be some reinforcement as you go to 2 Chronicles 22. There'll be some reinforcement of what we've discussed so far, but there's going to be some added detail to this. First verse of that place. Then the inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah his, all right, and we're going back to, and we're talking about in Judah. So you have Jehoshaphat, and then you have Jehoram, and then Ahaziah comes next. And I just get now, John, we're talking about the confusion of all of this. So in Israel, you have as rulers, Ahab, Ahaziah comes first, and then Jehoram. But then in Judah, you have Jehoshaphat, Jehoram comes first and Ahaziah. So those two are flopped even though, so yeah, that makes even more sense, John. Yeah, thanks for bringing that out. All right, so the inhabitants of Jerusalem made Ahaziah that is Jehoram of Judah, his youngest son, king in his place, for the raiders who came in with the Arabians into the camp had killed all his older sons. And we know this. The only one left is Ahaziah, also known as Azariah or Jehoahaz. So Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, reigned. Okay, now we need to talk about this just a minute. Verse 2. Ahaziah was 42 years old when he became king. If you hadn't before, you pick up on it now. What did we read in 2 Kings 8? How old was he when he became king? That's not the same thing. 42. I'm 39, so I'm getting close to 42. And I can tell you that even though I'm not quite there yet, 42 is not 22. I was thinking last night, I believe every day I think, I don't feel the same. I mean, I'm not complaining or anything. Life's great, but it's like I don't feel exactly the same as I did 10 years ago, 20, that's for sure. And I hear it's only exponentially more that way. But 42 is not 22. How do we make heads or tails? Does anyone look into this? So here's what I found in doing a little bit of investigation. I've told you before, I love Adam Clarke's writings, his commentary. He's not a Church of Christ member. He's a Methodist of the, I believe it's even maybe late 17th century, or late 1700s, and even on into, mainly lived in the 1800s. But he was a Hebraist, meaning an expert in the Hebrew language, just about like no other. He is so widely respected across different faith circles. I have a lot of respect for his writings. Don't agree with everything in his positions, but Old Testament in particular, he's tremendous. So having done a lot of research on this himself, here's what Adam Clarke remarks in his commentary. Ahaziah could not have been 42, as stated here. Because if he were 42 and you go back and you trace the lineage here, that would make him 2 years older than his father. That doesn't work, right? But if he's 22, now that adds up because that means his dad would have been about 18 years old whenever he was born. So it's obvious that he's 22 and not 42. If you're wondering, well, hang on a second. Scripture says here he's 42. Yes and no. Just to be very clear about this, Scripture, and by that I mean what was originally given and what was recorded by God's servants, absolutely is inspired by God and has absolutely no mistakes at all. Now, understanding that to be the case, there are a lot of people, uninspired people through the years, that have had the wonderful honor of copying down from one manuscript to another what it is that is inspired that God has stated. It's not entirely unlike all the translations of the Bible that we have today. And people have taken what it is that God has stated, and now it's their turn and their responsibility to put that. Those are not inspired people of God, even though they're handling things that are inspired. Not every manuscript we have reads exactly the same way. Now, they almost read exactly the same way. But there are some of them that have some very small differences in them that at times are very obvious copyist errors from people, bless you, who are uninspired. Just to reiterate, when God gives something and God inspires someone to write it down, it's 100% inspired. There are no mistakes, without a doubt, in what is given. But along the way, there have been, and these aren't bad people either, by the way, or most of them, uninspired people that make copies of what is inspired, but they are uninspired themselves. And there are along the way some slight errors in some copies of what is inspired that we have. Does that make sense? I hope it's not misunderstood in any way, and if so, please call me out on it now, and feel free to afterward also. John has it corrected. And I believe the translators did an excellent job, even though they were using a manuscript from Hebrew that did not read that way. I believe they have carried out their responsibility. I'll tell you why in just a moment. Thank you, John. Joe? Good. Appreciate that, Joe. And also, if you look at the original, it's not even really a word to us, it's a single letter. Those two letters for 22 and 42, they look almost identical to one another. And that makes a lot of sense why some uninspired people taking and copying what was inspired, saw something that was so similar and put something that was just slightly different. Again, in copies of what is inspired. Go ahead.
Again, the website I'm on.
Right. Good. Thank you for that, Joe. So, as John also brought up for us, well, my translation reads this way, and I suggested this. Did you say the English Standard Version? Because the translators did their job very well. There are times when, Joe, there are a couple of different manuscripts that are copies of what's inspired that read something differently. What you need to do is go back and check other sources that you have that are ancient and see how was it being translated. Even though they're translations, sometimes they're more ancient than the manuscripts themselves. And that helps to know what was around and what was being circulated 2,000 years ago. Let me give you a couple of examples. The translation of the Old Testament known as the Syriac, extremely old. The Arabic, as you might guess from the name, they're very old, and they have 22 in this reading. The Septuagint, which was translated about 100 years before Jesus and his apostles. That's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And some copies reads 20, as in the 22 then that's attached to it. The point of which is this. There are multiple Hebrew manuscripts, and there is a variation between some of them. But you go back and you check some of the most ancient sources and translations of the Hebrew, and you find 22. So it's obvious that this was a copyist error in some manuscripts from uninspired people as they were copying what was inspired. Does that make sense? Okay. Andrea? Really? Well, I wish I'd have had it. It made my job easier. No. Yeah. That's funny. I didn't realize that, so thank you for sharing that. I know several have that Apologetics Press study Bible. Yeah, very good. Okay, so we'll move on from that, but I didn't want to do that without a thorough explanation because, it catches you off guard when you know, well, wait a minute, there's an obvious contradiction here in the text. It's from a copyist error. I'm reading out of the New King James Version. I wish the translators would have, I don't know if I'd say give more diligence. They probably gave quite a bit on it, but I wish they would have come to a different conclusion than what they did as to the final rendering. Okay, so verse 3. Who would like to say this? Our memory verse. 2 Chronicles 22, verse 3. How could you sum up the reign of Ahaziah of Judah? That's terrible. But Roy, what are you supposed to do? What mama says goes, right? Does this mean that mamas are bad people? Whitley's like, I'm listening. Go ahead, finish. Answer that, Derek. No, good. Yeah, that's true. It's not saying that mothers are rotten people. It's saying mothers are influential people. And this mother has an awful influence on her child. Mother's influences are as powerful as anyone's. And unfortunately, she had the wrong influence on her child. And we also read in the New Testament, there's a lady named Eunice. She have a pretty good boy she had an influence on. What was his name? Timothy. Oh, where did Eunice learn all those great ways? From her mother. What was her name? Lois. Mothers are not bad people. Mothers are influential people. And that can go either way. Ladies, understand as mothers and grandmothers just how powerful your influence is. It makes a difference for generations to come. You can have the influence, and I know many, if not all, in this room are having this influence on their kids and grandkids where applicable, where it's an influence like on Timothy with Eunice and Lois, but it's also possible that you can have the influence that Athaliah unfortunately had on her son, Ahaziah. He did evil, verse 4, in the sight of the Lord, like the house of Ahab, for they were his counselors after the death of his father to his destruction. If you've seen a reign that was just atrocious, a complete mess, and then you get those same people who gave bad advice and you set them up to give you all of your advice. Wasn't it Einstein who said that would be the definition of insanity? The same thing over and over, and expecting a different result. Makes me think of Psalm 1, verse 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Be careful from whom you're seeking advice. Get it from people that love the Lord, and preferably be people who have experience and who have shown they understand what it takes to be his servant. Verse 5, he also followed their advice and went with Jehoram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, to war against Ahaziah, king of Syria, at Ramoth Gilead. And the Syrians wounded Joram. We read about this earlier. Again, there's some additional details, though, in these last 4 verses. Then he returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds which he had received at Ramah, when he fought against Ahaziah, king of Syria. And Azariah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Jehoram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel, because he was sick. Now, I'm reading from the New King James, and as you can hear there, the New King James, correctly there, it's a different name. That's okay, it's the same person. Jehoahaz, Azariah, Ahaziah, same person. So you have the guy in the south who goes down to see the guy over here, kind of middle left, Jehoram, who's reigning as king over Israel because he's sick, he was wounded in battle, he's trying to recover. But we're told in verse 7, his going to Joram was God's occasion for Ahaziah's downfall. For when he arrived, he went out with Jehoram against Jehu, the son of Nimshi, whom the Lord had anointed to cut off the house of Ahab. And it happened when Jehu was executing judgment on the house of Ahab and found the princes of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's brothers, who served Ahaziah, that he killed him. Then he searched for Ahaziah, and they caught him. He was hiding in Samaria. And what's taken place here is they've gone to Jezreel. He's traveled up from Jerusalem, I'll say about 50 miles to Jezreel to see the king. And that's when Jehu, who arises against both of them, and he kills the king of Israel and all these people of the families. And he's chasing Jehoahaz, down to Samaria, about 10 miles to the southwest, the capital city of Israel. And they brought him to Jehu. They found him hiding in Samaria. And when they had killed him, they buried him, because they said, respect shown in his death. After all, he is the son of Jehoshaphat. This guy was widely respected by both provinces, Judah and Israel, who sought the Lord with all his heart. So the house of Ahaziah had no one to assume power over the kingdom. Okay, so 2 things here really quickly. I'm going to read from 1 Kings 9 if you want to follow along as we close. 1 Kings chapter 19, I think I said 9. But 1 Kings 19, we're going to read verse 9. This goes back a ways, but remember, it was according to the word of the Lord this happens. Verse 9, when Elijah's hiding out because Ahab and Jezebel are wanting to kill him, and Jezebel especially. There he came to a cave, Elijah did, and lodged in it. Behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Go down to verse 15. And the Lord said to him, go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. He's going to replace Ben-Hadad. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. Listen to this. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael of Syria shall Jehu, who's going to be the new king of Israel, put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. So when we hear this is in fulfillment of the Lord's word that had been spoken, a decade or so earlier, God laid all of this out. And now we're reading all of it coming to fruition. It's amazing, the mind of the Lord. I want to reiterate where we were, 2 Chronicles 22, verse 9. So they come, they find him, they kill him, and listen, the house of Ahaziah had no one left to assume power. This is in Judah and the south, just like has happened in these other families to the north. Remember, Ahaziah, he had no son, and that's why Jehoram takes over. In the south, here is another Ahaziah. He has no son. He only reigns 1 year. He's too young to have one. And no one is left to assume power over the kingdom. And this is going to leave a vacated throne in Judah. And this is a dangerous time. And I suggest that because arguably the most wicked woman ever to live is going to see that vacant position of power and say, I could be the first. And in fact, she will be the only ruling queen over either Israel or Judah. And not because she's chosen or has the right to by God. I think it's going to be a lot like Abimelech in the period of the Judges. Through treachery, murder, and treason, she claims the throne. I don't know that God ever recognizes her to be a rightful ruler of Israel. She's going to follow right in the footsteps of her mama, Jezebel, who fits right in that category among the most wicked human beings, including female, to have ever lived. We'll see what her daughter's like in coming weeks. Yes, sir, Roy. Right. No, I got you. And I appreciate that. Yeah, I agree. I would remain open-minded about it. I will say there is a position that it's correct as it's in there, but that it's counting from the grandfather and not from the father. That makes good sense. Yeah, and some have drawn that conclusion. I don't think it is, but I'm like you. I'm still open-minded to yeah. Right, and it could be, yeah, possibly so. Yes, sir, Joe. So that would be a third possibility. Interesting. Yeah, and I've seen that. What I was referencing is mentions the granddaughter of Omri, doesn't mention Ahab, so it could be some connection of 42 from Ahab. Could be from that. Yeah, and I'm saying I'm open to it. Yeah, could be. Yeah. All right, any others? All right, thank you for the comments. I'm grateful for the input. Next time, 2 Kings 2. We're going to go back. We kind of skipped ahead looking at all these descendants of the male descendants and actual rulers God recognizes of Ahab and Jezebel. So we've done that. It's done. Okay, it's finished as far as those descendants go. They've been cut off. They're no descendants. And now we're going to go back to 2 Kings 2. Let's memorize verse 14. Read that in 2 Kings 2:14. Get back to Elijah. All right, thanks.